What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Got a special guest on, spent many years of his life in federal prison. Started at a low. I think he spent many years at a Penn, but he can tell his story better than I can. Tell the people who you are, tell them where you're from, and let's get into your story, bro.
All right, my name's Seth. I'm from a rural town about halfway between State College and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. About 10,000 people. It's a beautiful town to grow up in. Actually, in the 80s there was a TV show called PM Magazine, and it was like a precursor to the tabloid TV shows of today, and they voted it one of the best places in America to live. So I grew up in a great environment. My mother was a nurse. My dad owned a very successful local advertising business. He did sports advertising. And, I come from a good family. My grandfather was a local police officer. My great grandfather was head of the local Republican Party. And it was totally unexpected what the turn that my life took. Like I got good grades in high school growing up, had a great group of friends. I was a good athlete, had a beautiful, great girlfriend. And, I graduated from high school in 97. I went to Penn State University. And that was like the first time that I experienced like the life that, you know, the life. And so I started with like drinking, drugs and alcohol, started smoking weed, doing, just the average college kid. But for me, for some reason, I just have an addictive nature, and it became more for me. After, my first semester, I was dean's list. I did really good. And after that, I just started bombing, it just started to take over my life. And after about 3 semesters, I had pretty much flunked out. So my father's like, okay, you're coming home. I'm going to send you to work at the chicken plant, which is miserable work, or you can go to the military. So I wasn't having the military. So I just wasn't doing any of it. So I had a friend whose father was actually a state trooper, and he took me to Philly the first time and started showing me the ropes, showing me how to hustle. And at first we were hustling weed, coke, and I was able to stay at Penn State, not as a student, but just hustling. I was like the campus drug dealer, and I did that for some years, and it was, I wasn't real successful, like big shots or anything, but I had a time, 2001, 2002, where I was making 5,000 a week clear. And I was living over there. It was a big party, and then eventually the cases started.
Let me ask you a little bit about Penn State. You're down there, you're the campus drug dealer. I mean,
Yeah,
administration, no one knows that you're just living here and you're not a student anymore, and you're just, kind of, I guess, polluting the campus.
yeah. Well, I didn't live in student housing. I had my own apartment with a friend from Lewistown. And then by this point, once I started hustling, it was me and a girlfriend that got a place together. And we had a house. It wasn't on campus, it was off campus, but that whole community is really small. So you have your campus, and then the town is just all around it. So you can be over there and people will think you're a student, but there's 45,000 students on the main campus. So nobody knows a student from a non-student. You don't know 90% of the people that go to college there. But yeah, when I started hustling with dealing with heroin, and there started being people overdosing, people falling out. Like I remember at one point the local Center Daily Times put out an article. It said heroin is here because there was a bunch of overdoses. And I knew at that point, I told my girlfriend somebody had died. It was on the front page of the paper. They kind of tried to involve me in that. So I was like, hey, it's time to go, and we packed up and went to California for a time. But eventually, I can't hustle in California. I don't know anybody. I don't know the scene. I come back.
Let me ask you this. What was the heroin scene like at Penn State? I mean, were there a lot of students using, or how?
No, actually, there wasn't. This was in, late 90s, from about 98 to 2002. There really wasn't, but they would do anything. I actually, it was kind of a dirty thing, but the town I grew up in, by this point, there was a heroin epidemic. Like it changed. This town is no longer what it used to be. In the late 90s, they had an open air drug market in town, just like you're in Philly. People from the smaller towns would come to buy here. And so I kind of took that and took it over there. And it was never like, it wasn't cool over there. It wasn't a thing that people put out there. But when I would give it to people the first time, I might tell them that it was Special K. Honestly, I'd be like, hey, I got weed, I got coke. I would pay a frat house like an 8 ball of coke to stand there and hand out their cups for a keg party. And you charge people $5 for a cup, you put them at, and then when they would buy their cup, I'd tell them, hey, I got weed, I got coke, and I got K. And eventually, they do what they thought was K, and before long, they got to have it. It doesn't take long. And
You feel bad
I was
about
young and stupid, so
Did you feel bad about that, about what you were doing?
at the time, no, because after a while, even if they did find out, it's like nobody cared. They just didn't care. But at that time, I didn't feel bad about anything because I had to have it too. I wasn't just selling the stuff I was using. But the markup, like in Philly, you may, like, let's say you buy a bundle in Philly, it's going to cost you back then $70, $80. I turn around and sell it for $300 or $400 in State College. So you can basically do half your product and still double up your money every time. And, I thought I was young, early 20s. I thought I was invincible. So I just did it until the wheels fell off, and they fell off. They did.
Eventually, you end up going to California. What are you doing when you get to California?
I was just hiding out. By that point, I had caught a state charge. I bailed out, and so I went on the run, was in California. I was living in El Cajon, right outside of San Diego. And I had a place, I still remember the address, 44 South Anza Street, El Cajon, California. And, it was a good vibe out there. I really liked it. It was beautiful weather, and after about 6 months or so, I just started running short of money and I had to come back. The plan was come back, make some more money, and go back because I had basically paid up my rent and everything for a year. But it didn't work out that way. I come back and, it didn't take long before I was back that, people told them I was back. I started, and I got arrested, and I got arrested with more drugs. So I ended up getting a 1.5 to 3 in the state with a consecutive 5 years in the feds. It was not a big drug case. It was small. I was surprised that the feds even picked it up. And but they kind of wanted me for that overdose, but I could never get charged for that. I really wasn't involved in that. It just my name got thrown in the mix. So anyway, I do my little state time, my little 18 months. Now, this is the crazy thing with the feds. I'm going from my state prison in Erie, Pennsylvania to Allenwood Low. So it's about a 6-hour drive. They take me to Erie County for 3 months. I go to Allegheny County for a couple of days. Then they put me on an airplane,
How old are you
go
at
to
this
Oklahoma
time,
City.
Seth, how
What's
old are
that?
you at this time?
Back then, I was 23. I was 23 when I went away for the first time.
You're 23. You go to state prison. Now you're heading to federal prison, but you're going to a low. Are you a
Right.
little worried about state prison, or have you heard like, oh, it's a low, I'm good?
The state prison, like, yeah, I was worried, but my state prison, like the cops run that joint. If you just keep your mouth shut, stay out of the way, and you're gonna be okay. Like it's not like the feds, like the penitentiary where the inmates run the place. So the state was really no problem. You're basically locked in your cell all but a couple hours a day. You got your own TV, you can smoke cigarettes, everything. But when I knew I was going to the feds, I didn't know I was going to a low at first. I figured I'd go to an FCI. So yeah, I'm sucking up the information from people in county, trying to figure out what's going on. But when I get there, it really was club fed. Like it's everything that you thought federal prison was, but that only happens in lows and camps. Like, commissary twice a week, tennis courts, bocce courts. Now there was still some serious guys like John Carneglia was on the block next door. He was supposedly one of the shooters on Paul Castellano. There were some serious people there, but for the most part, by that point, they're all at the end of their bids. Nobody's trying to have no problems. Everybody just wants out or to get to a camp. So I do my time. I go home. I'm in a halfway house actually for 6 months. While I'm in the halfway house, I come out, I don't really have anything, and I still have that young mindset. Like in prison, your mind is not mature. You're still you're around criminals all day, so you're just hearing street stories. And the guy that I lived with was a bank robber. And for 5 years in there, all I heard about was robbing banks. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. And it was always in the back of my mind that I might do this someday. That might be something that I do. Yeah, it was crazy. But when I came out, I tried to have the right mindset, but I knew I wasn't finished. It was terrible to say, especially now at this point in my life, but that's how I was back then. It was all go all the time, and it was, so I'm in the halfway house and I start hustling inside the halfway house, but I wasn't using because, you get random drug tests in there. I wasn't trying to go back. So I was still hustling on the side. I got weekends out of the halfway house. I'd come back to my hometown and make a couple moves and take some money back. So once I'm released from the halfway house, the supervised release isn't as strict as like state parole. So the drug tests are sporadic at best. And I started using again. So, that clouds my judgment. And before long, I remember I had a girlfriend. She was pregnant, and Christmas was coming up, and I had gone through all of our money. I remember she's on me about, it's Black Friday, I want to go shopping. I had run through all of our money, and I knew the feds were following me. Everywhere I went, it seemed like there was these black SUVs following me around. So I knew. And so I wasn't hustling like I could to make money. And I couldn't work because I was using. My habit was just so out of control. My story is basically, it's a story of addiction. I had to overcome that to get my life right. But anyway, I do the first bank. It was Black Friday, and I'm just driving because I'm sick of my girlfriend bitching at me. And I'm looking at this place, and I'm like, it just came into my mind, like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go rob this place, and that's what it is. So I wrote a little note, and I go in, I slide the clerk the note, and I'm not a big guy. Like, I'm 5'4" with my Timbs on. I have a little weight to me, but when I'm using, I don't. So she gave me no respect when I have a note, and I had to get kind of aggressive, like, threatening stuff. So she grabs a handful of money, throws it in the bag, rolls out the bag, threw the bag at me, hit me in the chest, fell on the floor. So I grab it, it's a couple $1,000s, but I'm like, it was easy money and it was so quick. And I just didn't hear anything about it. All I did was flip up my hood and I put a scarf on. It's cold in Pennsylvania late November. So I had a scarf covering from here, and I don't hear anything about it. So about a week later, I'm running low. I'm like, hey, I can do this again, but I can do it right this time. And so I go over to the State College area, and I was familiar with a couple banks over there, and I rob it. I came in a side entrance. I go up to the clerk. Basically, there was no one else in the bank. And, I didn't come in guns blazing or anything, but she claimed that I laid a gun on the counter and asked for the money. So I get the money. I leave. Again, I read the newspaper the next day from the Center Daily Times, and it said that they were looking for a 5'8", 5'7" black guy. So I just thought I was good. At the time, I'm living in Harrisburg with my kid's mother, and it was a Saturday morning, December 6th, 2008, and, I hear the buzzer ringing, and that was it. That was a wrap. So, now I'm a career offender. I had a little county sentence back in the day. Then I had my state charge. I'm a career offender. My guidelines are
the feds,
150.
Right? You're charged
Yes.
again. Now this is your second Fed beef, and now it's
Yes.
time now.
Yes.
How much time do you get sentenced to?
So I got 166 months. I got,
how
yes.
old was the time you get this 166 months?
I was 29 when I got arrested. I was 30 when I got sentenced. And they gave me two 151s, run concurrent, with a consecutive 15 months for the supervised release violation. While I was inside at USP Florence, I caught an extra time for a weapon. Now,
let's talk a little bit about the prison experience, right? Now, you've been to Lowe's, you've been to some nice prisons. Now you're on your way to a penitentiary. What does it feel like in your mind? Because I know you heard the stories when you're at a low. Are you a little worried, like, damn, I'm going to a penitentiary now?
Yeah, I was worried, but when I got arrested that time, I kind of was in the mode of this is going to be my life now. When you're that age and I'm looking at 20-year max, and they could run it wild. They were threatening to. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be my life. So I was kind of like, I'm just going to go hard now. I don't really care. I felt like, that was the first time when I got arrested on that case. That was the first time in my life that I called home and my mother wouldn't answer the phone. My brother wouldn't answer the phone. Like, I felt truly alone. And, my son was born while I was in prison. My girlfriend was only 3 months pregnant when I got arrested. So I was really looking back, like I didn't fully reflect on my past, but I did a little bit, to where I was like, I can't believe I did this to myself. So anyway, when I went to prison, then I ended up going to Fairton FCI at first, unbelievably. And that was another place that was like club fed. Now, there was more violence, there was gang activity, there was some stuff going down there, but it wasn't Pollock or Florence. So while I'm at Fairton, I heard you talk before, there's a medicine cabinet on the wall. I get maintenance to come in they had a hammer drill, remove the mirror, take out the slam anchors, remove the mirror, drill some holes behind the mirror, take a hammer and a blanket, and I punched a hole about this big behind my mirror. Enough. I had about 7 gallons of wine cooking back there at all time. I had 3 bags, 2.5 gallons apiece, and I was cooking moonshine. And there, I would make, off each 2.5 gallon batch, I would make 5 12-ounce bottles of moonshine. I was selling each bottle of moonshine for 5 flat books, so about $50 a bottle. So while I was there, I was making after splitting it with my cellie. If I shined 3 times a week, we were splitting $750 a week. If I only did it twice a week, I'm making $500 a week. So. But eventually, I'm there 2-3 years. I'm still, at this point, like, why quit with my addiction? There was a lot of drugs, alcohol there. I was drinking a lot. I was doing drugs. And I just didn't really care. So eventually you get one of those What's that?
What kind of drugs were you doing?
Heroin.
You're doing heroin in prison.
Yes. Yep. And because I was making so much money off the moonshine, basically I had a street habit in there. It was like being on the streets. And everybody wanted to deal with me. That compound was basically run by Baltimore. So there was a lot of dope there. And, they all wanted to deal with me because they wanted alcohol. So basically I had whatever I wanted when I was there. And, I always had rules where I wouldn't drink while I did it. I cleaned everything up. I wouldn't go to sleep till the next day after 4 o'clock count. I would bleach the whole cell top to bottom the next day after I shined, and that night. Put everything back in the hole. So anyway, Christmas Eve.
Seth. Let me stop you
Yeah.
so the viewers know. You're in there making moonshine. You're making alcohol. You hook up this concoction where I want people to know what you're doing when you're shining. Hook up this concoction where you're pretty much distilling the alcohol. You're selling it. You're making flat books, which, you convert into money in federal prison. Some viewers don't know what we're talking about, so I want to make sure we explain that to them. And eventually, Farrington don't work out for you, right? I mean, why do you end up leaving Farrington?
Well, eventually I get one of the super cops. I get drunk on Christmas Eve. I think Christmas Eve 2011. I drink while I'm shining. So the next morning, they would come around and give you meal tickets for your Christmas meal. He opens the door. I got the mirror hanging sideways. We're just hammered in there. So he actually doesn't search right then. He leaves. I get the cell straight. The next day, he comes back when I'm in the yard and tears the cell up. And he finds the hole. And I take the weight. My cellie's only got like 2 years to the door, And so I take the weight and I'm in the hole. And basically, I'm on the next bus smoking to Pollock. And
now, I got to stop you because I remember when they told me I was on the bus to Pollock. I was leaving USP Lee. I'm on my way to Pollock, right? Or Pollock.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, man, that's the one place that I didn't want to go to. I didn't want to, well, really two. I didn't want to go there, and I didn't want to go to Victorville, right? Didn't want to go to California.
Yeah.
What's it like when you find out, man, you're on your way to Pollock?
So crazy enough, when I'm in the hole at Fairton, my cellie was back on a violation. He was a kid from Philly, and he had been at Pollock for years. So when I heard I was going to Pollock, he was able to tell me, and yeah, I was shook. I was shook. I still had that mindset where, you know, I hadn't seen it yet, so I'm like, I can fit in. I can fit in basically anywhere, so I can make it. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When you walk into Pollock, it is different. By this point in time, I had 10 years of doing time, state, federal, at lower levels. But it took me 10 years of doing time to make it to the pen. You walk into Pollock, there's these big windows, and back then everybody would take their knife or whatever and start tapping on the window when they let the bus out. So you're walking to the unit and you just hear whatever, the whole compound tapping their windows, tap, 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 tap. And the cops like, you guys better get your knife. They're all tapping their knives. But I remember we pull in with a bus of 34 people. Only about, I would say, 12 of us even go to the compound. When I walk onto the unit, when I get to the unit, there was 3 of us going to my unit. I think I was on C1. And the cop says, if you're fucked up, turn around and go back right now. Once you go through these doors, I can't help you.
Tell people what that means, Seth, because some people don't know what you mean.
Basically, the guards don't run those prisons. The inmates run the prison. They know who you are before you get there. They know what you're in for. They know. So if somebody if Whitey Bulger's coming to that jail, the inmates knew in advance and they were waiting to get him. So, I think there was 3 of us going to that unit. One guy turned around and immediately left. So it was just 2 of us from the bus that were on that one unit. But when I walk in, I see there's a couple white guys with shaved heads standing there. And I go right up to them, tell them, hey, I'm in for bank robbery. This is my first penitentiary. They're like, yeah, your name's Yoke. They knew my name in advance. And they're like, yeah, we know. You're a bank robber, first penitentiary. And that was shocking, like that they knew who I was before I came. They're like, that's going to be your cell up there. And, my first night there, we actually had a power outage. So we were locked down the whole night. The next day we come out and they're like, you got a homeboy from Philly. He's next door. Go meet up with him. You have to be with your homeboy. And they explain the whole situation. You have a car. You have to be with your car. At Pollock, there was a regular independent car basically run by the Missouri guys. They were the deepest. And then you had your Northeast independent, which was New York, Philly, Boston, which even though I'm not from Philly, I'm from 3 hours west. But, if you're from Pennsylvania, you're either Philly or Pittsburgh. And sometimes you could be Harrisburg, but they're never deep. So anyway, there's 2 other white guys from Philly. So we go up. They had a little pool area at Rec where you could go shoot pool at the time. And we go up there. I'm talking to my homeboy from Philly. And when we leave, we come out and my first day in the pen, and we get right under the tower and they start dropping bombs. And I don't know what's going on. My homeboy just grabs me. Is like, get on a knee. So I get down and you got like 20 Muslims and they're carrying a Muslim up to the, they basically told him he's got to check in, go to protective custody. He refused. So they carried him up there and the cops come out with the guns. They start dropping bombs. And I was like, oh, great. My first day, we're going to get locked down. They took the guy to the shoe, let everyone go about their business. And that was that. That was pretty shocking. My first day.
What was your first violent experience at USP Pollock?
My first violent experience?
It could specifically be you, but what did you see? I mean, what was the first time you seen some real violence?
Yeah, the first time I saw it, and it was the one that still sticks in my head. I've seen people get murdered, and nothing sticks in my head like this one. There was a white guy. I think he was a gang member, but I ran into him some years later in transit. But there was 2 ABTs, I think, either ABT or DWBs, and by the time I saw it, I noticed it. He was unconscious. He's on the ground, and they kept kicking him in the back of the head with the steel toes. And they actually stopped, looked up at the tower, got their wind, and started kicking the kid again. And his eyeball was out of his head, and he was laying like this, and his eyeball was out about 6 inches, laying on his arm. And when I ran into that kid years later in transit, he tattooed an eyeball on his arm right there. They were able to put it back in place. Obviously, it's not normal looking, but that sticks with me. Yeah, that one stuck with me.
When you get to a penitentiary like USP Pollock, right, or Pollock, do your
Yeah,
homeboys tell you like, "Hey, man, this is what it is. You might have to put in work." And does there come a point when you have to put in any work at Pollock?
yeah, absolutely. Like for the most part, because our car was really small, so we kind of like just were able to do our own thing and not really, but at some point they're gonna ask you, basically at the time I still had 10 years to do my first penitentiary. So yeah, you're gonna get a heart check. So one day, Big Freddie, he had the car at the time. He's like, "Hey, you got problem putting in work?" I was like, "No." I already knew I was expecting it at some point, and I had a friend from Iowa who kind of tipped me off and said, "Hey, you're gonna be putting in work today. Don't make us look good, basically." So Big Fred asked me, and the politics there were crazy. Like the Northeast Independents actually had like this thing where they had a real strong tie with the ABT. I didn't see that anywhere else, just there. And maybe because the R shot caller and the ABT shot caller were on the same unit. But they're like, "You need to go see Buck after lunch. He'll be on the yard." Buck was a high ranking ABT. So I come out of the chow hall, I go to the yard, and I go see Buck, and they send me with this kid from Missouri that's running ABT. He's a prospect and he's trying to get made. So he's trying to make his bones. So they tell us who it is. It was some dude from North Dakota, which I had no problem with the kid. He was, an athlete. He would go out there and play softball. I would play softball. But, I found out later what he was in jail for. He was in there. He killed his parents and his little sister and his brother. And it was a state charge. He escaped and they put him in the feds. So anyway, they want him hit. So Buck runs it down. What's going to happen? He's like, "Okay. Like I said, I'm a smaller guy. I'm 5'4" with my Timbs on, but I got some weight behind me. I'm working out every day. I got some size. And so the plan is we're going to go out there and play softball. We're just throwing the ball around so we can get close to the kid because he's doing the same. And Doug's going to hit the kid, and then I'm going to just basically wrap up his legs, take him to the ground, and lay on his legs and let Doug put in the work." So basically, it kind of doesn't go like that. Doug hits the kid, and the kid, the kid's ready to go. So I take out his legs, but during the melee, Doug ends up laying on him, and I have to put the boots to him. So I'm kicking, I'm hitting him with knees. At the time, I didn't really want to hurt the guy, but I also knew what it was. You have to do it, and you have to do it good. So I'm kicking, I'm punching, I'm hitting him with knees, and it seemed like forever, but eventually they shoot the little rocket out. There's a rocket comes shooting out of the tower in your general direction, and then the bombs go off. And then, I'm kind of looking out the corner of my eye. When the cops get right up on us, then I stopped. I lay down. So the cops cuffed me, and as they cuffed me, they're cuffing me and Doug. The kid jumps up and tries to take my head off. He tried to kick me, and I'm down. I seen it coming. Was like, "Oh man!" And the cop, he was a rookie cop, ripped me out of the way, and basically I didn't get kicked in the face. So some years later, when I was at McKean, I actually ran into that cop. He shows up there. He's like, "Hey, you remember me? I saved your life at Pollock." I was like, "Yeah, what are you doing here?" And he was the captain at McKean. He became a captain. But I go to the hole for that.
I want to ask you something because you grew up in a good neighborhood. You go to Penn State, typical white family. I mean,
Yeah.
what it is in the suburbs, and you're in a maximum security prison and you have to put in work. What does it feel like in your heart? Do you have remorse? Like, damn, man, I got to do this, but man, I really don't want to. I mean, what goes through your mind in that moment when you have to do something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Not to the extent that it would now or that it would have when I was young. At that point in time, I had been there for maybe, 6 months. So, I mean, and I had been doing time for a while. So you kind of become numb to it. And that's just, I accepted that was my life. So yeah, what in the moment when I was kicking this kid, I remember thinking that, like, damn, I don't want to hurt this guy. Like, he never did anything to me. I didn't know at the time that he was what he was, but it wasn't to the extent that, like, when I think back on it now, it was later. Once I got off to Florence and I was in the shoe getting prosecuted for a weapon, I'm on the tier with, they got the Boston Marathon bomber a couple doors down from me waiting for bed space at the ADX. Florida Jeff, Chevy Kehoe were in there, all waiting for ADX bed space. And I'm like, how did I end up here? How did I end up here? Like that's when I was finally like, I only had 4 or 5 years left, and they're talking about giving me another 4 years. How am I going to explain this to my mother? By this time, my family had come back and was accepting of me again, was helping me. And like, I have a son now who's 14 years old. The first time I saw him, he was 2 years old at a visiting room in Fairton. I didn't see him again till the day I walked out of prison, July 31st, 2021. So
we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me ask you about that Boston bomber guy, right? Did he talk to guys cell to cell? Did he engage with people at all, or was he just quiet?
No, I saw him going to rec. He was in like a strip out cell, and he was, he's like real tall, like probably like 6'2", 6'3", but really skinny, like 120, 130 pounds. And he looked terrified. Like he looked like he didn't belong there. He looked like an Amish guy. Around here, you got a lot of Amish. He looked like he was Amish. The beard, real skinny, kind of scary. He didn't look like that, but no, he didn't communicate. There was a guy from Boston, they called him 6'9", and he was a killer. 6'9" was a vicious killer. And I remember when they brought the kid onto the tier, the marathon bomber, 6'9" yells out, "Hey, that's my homeboy, stick him in here with me." And I remember the guards are like, "Yeah, right." But no, you didn't hear it. I don't think I heard his voice the whole time that I was on that range with him. He wasn't there long. They got him to the ADX real quick.
You get caught with that prison shank, we'll use the terms that people know. You get caught with this. How much time do you get for that?
So they offered me 33 months, which my maximum was 36 months. They sent me to, it's called FCI Inglewood to fight the case. It's actually a low. They stick me in the shoe because Colorado only has one courthouse, and it's in Denver, which is 5-6 hours away from Florence. So I'm in the shoe at Inglewood FCI, and this Arizona AB from Florence comes down there for stabbing a sex offender, and he tells me, "Hey, you give me $300, I'm going to take that knife. I'm going to tell him I stuck it." He was on my unit. He's like, "I'm going to tell him I put it in there. It was mine." And, so basically, I did that. I gave him the money. So he tells the feds that the weapon was his. I was able to communicate to them what it looked like because they did a little videotape thing. And so at first I thought I had beat it. They were furious. They take me back to Florence. They stick me in the shoe. The warden is furious because they think I beat him. So the cops tell me, "Hey, pack up. You're on the bus tomorrow." He's like, "I never seen anyone get transferred that quick. I think I'm getting transferred." So they put me on the bus, and they take me back to Inglewood and recharge me for lying to a federal officer. That carried a 6-month sentence because they said I lied and said the knife was mine to take the weight for this guy, and really it was his. So they had to get something on me. So I ended up with 6 months for lying to a federal officer.
It's outrageous, the things that they do, man. They go to all lengths to bring you back, transport you.
Yeah.
6 months.
For lying to a CO. Sorry, I got a little sinus infection.
Right.
It's really.
You weren't at Florence when they had the riot over there. It was in 2008, right? April?
Yeah, that was in 2008. I was there from 14 to 16.
Craziest thing you ever seen in federal prison, bro?
The guy with the eye getting kicked out, that was one. The guy that got killed for the bologna sandwich, that was one. Basically, we're on hunger strike. The guy took a sack lunch.
Stop you. That was at Pollock. What year were you there?
I was there from 12 to 14. That happened in 12, I believe. Yeah.
I was in the shoe there at the same time. That was a white dude. They told everybody not to eat, and he ended up eating his sandwich. He came out. They beat him up, and he walks down to
Yeah.
the station and dies in the office. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that see everything. I'm pretty sure that happened. That happened right before I got there, I think. But just, you know,
A tattoo on the back of your head, man.
yeah. Do I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know who you are. I know exactly who you are.
Yeah. Where were we at together?
We're in Pollock together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You ever get anybody else on the baseball field over there?
No, just that one. That's just that one time.
What's the tattoo on the back of your head?
It's an eagle.
Okay. I
Because
know who
they
you
used
are,
to.
but you're different than the dude that I thought you were.
Oh yeah.
I thought you were one
No.
that jumped on me.
No. No.
There's a
No.
little dude over there. Maybe he was from Kentucky, but he had like the tattoo of his state on the back of his head.
Yeah. Here, I'm gonna turn around. If you could see it, it's a Philadelphia eagle on the back of my head. So
I know, I know exactly who you are. I wasn't there
they
long.
would call me Philly,
Got me in like
even
3
though.
days, but it don't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway, wow. All right. I know who you are. We were in the shoe at the same time, bro.
Oh yeah.
I think you were in the cell across from me, actually. I can't even believe that, bro, that I'm talking to you. That you're
I remember, like, I every time I see you, I know the voice, I know the face, but I could never place how I knew it. I figured maybe we were in transit together or something. But
I
yeah,
got
it's a
there.
small
Some
system.
people were asking me, like, they knew who I was, but they were trying to determine, bro. They're like, hey, you got boxing gloves on your arm? And I was like, nah, I don't got no tattoo and no boxing gloves. And later that day, I mean, I was gonna make a move, bro. You know what I mean? I was gonna do something to someone and get out of there.
Yeah,
But they seen
yeah,
the boxing gloves on my arm, and that's when they got me, bro. They got
yeah.
me on the baseball
You
field.
know, another thing, when I was at Pollock, there was a Mexican mafia kid who I was cool with. His name was Spider, and Spider just ran up some bills, but he was a good-hearted kid and a good guy. And you know, I think that if Spider would have grew up like how I grew up, he would have done something with his life. And I remember Spider, there was 4 guys beating him. We come off the yard, and I was with the head ABT guy walking with him, and we all got stuck on stupid for a second. It was right when you come out of the yard, they were getting him in the grass by the unit, and he was taking it. He wasn't screaming, he wasn't yelling. And then finally, the guy behind us, some sack guy, is like, hey, keep moving. So it snapped us out of it, and we keep it moving. So this guy's getting beat half to death, and everybody's just moving like it's not happening. But then you get so far away and you hear him start screaming. By that point, the knives had come out and the kid's screaming. And I remember those screams, like, and I was like, you know, I felt that's something you look back on and you feel, you know, I can't believe I had to go through that stuff.
You know, we
I
did some
can't believe
bad.
I put myself in that situation.
You know, we did some bad things as independents to other people at other prisons, and
Yeah,
they sent me to one place I didn't want to go, and that was Pollock. And when I get there, it was their turn to get me back. That's just how the system works, right?
yeah, it is. You know, when I was at Florence, I had a cellie that he was kind of a nut. He was from Kentucky. He wanted a single cell. We go to the rec cage. He gets his cuffs off first and takes off on me. What are you going to do? You know, I'm cuffed up. He hit me about 3 times. The cop starts spraying, and that's it. Just so he could get a single cell. He didn't want to have a cellie. So,
Yes. So that's what people need to understand about federal prison. That dudes will assault you just
yeah,
further. You don't even have a problem with the guy. He's like, hey, I want a single cell. So
yes,
on this guy, he's got on handcuffs, and there's nothing you can do. He's punching you in the face, and there's nothing you
yeah.
can. One dude might be
Again,
stabbing you, and there's nothing you can do, right?
yeah. Again, at Florence, the kid 6'9", he was from Boston. He wanted a single cell. His cellie was from Kentucky. They were good friends. He took a razor out to the rec cage and cut the kid's throat. Got behind him, slit his throat. And it was like a millimeter away from hitting an artery. The kid lived, but barely, you know. And he got a scar. He's scarred for life, all because this guy wanted a single cell and he wanted to go to the ADX so he could have.
So 6'9" pretty much does this to someone that's his friend because, pretty much, right?
Yeah, yeah, happens every day. You know, people want to go to the ADX, or they want a single cell, or they just lose their minds. You know, when I was in for that knife, when I was fighting that knife case, I was in the shoe fighting that case for 14 months. Yeah, 14 months in the hole, that, you know, that takes a toll. And, sometimes you can't even get a book in there. So it's rough. It was rough.
You pretty much spent 14 months of your life inside a cell. What does it do to you mentally and emotionally? Tell the people, man, what it's like to be in the shoe, in the hole, in the box. There's different names for this. But what does it do to you
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally, bro? Are there days when you feel like crying? Are there days when you're frustrated? You feel like punching the wall? What's it like?
Everything. Yeah, you experience every emotion that you can think of, but mostly, for the most part, eventually you go numb. Like I felt numb. Like I felt like, for the most part, I had no emotions. Like you just are just going through the motions. I worked out a lot when I was in the shoe because it's the only thing that would make you feel a little bit better is just to work out hard. While I was in the shoe, like my grandmother died, my brother, me and my brothers, we were really close. Like there's three of us. We're all year apart. Like I'm 44, one's 43, and the other one would be 42. And he passed away. He was only 36 years old, I think, 36. And I didn't, because you only get the phone once a month. So I didn't even find out till 2 weeks after he passed that he passed away.
How did he pass away? If you
So
don't mind me asking, bro.
what's that?
How did he pass away, if you don't mind me asking?
Drugs. Drugs. Yep. He was
Let
a
me
very successful artist. Everybody in my family seemed like they ended up being real successful except for me. But my brother was a real successful artist. He was at an art show in New Orleans and he didn't show up to the art show and the people went to check on him and he had died during the night from drugs. Yeah. And the girl he was with, some other fiend, robbed his wallet and left him there to die, you know? Yeah.
let me ask you this, right? Did you ever stop the drug addiction while you were in prison? Did it end before you got out?
Um, yeah. Yeah. You know, I was lucky enough when I left. Well, after that 14 months in the shoe, they sent me over to Atwater. That place was, I get there on Friday. I'm at Victorville Transit. Somebody escaped from Atwater. Some little paisa got out on a Friday. They took me in there on a Monday. So we were locked down. I think I got there in May. We were locked down till the end of August. We come up for like 3 weeks, in the cell with nothing. You couldn't even get a bar of soap. The cops weren't passing. It was crazy. Worst lockdown ever. So we come up for just a couple weeks, and a couple natives attacked a guard. We were locked down from September to January 1st. So basically, I was there for a year. 9 months of that were on lockdown. So I got 14 months clear conduct at Florence. I got a year clear conduct there. I had turned 36 in that time period, somewhere in there. And I get back to an FCI. And when I had about 2 years left, I was like, you know, that's when I was, I started to reflect and started to think about my son. I have an older son who's 23 years old who basically, I wasn't there. He doesn't know who I am. We talked on the phone maybe twice when I came home, but I haven't seen him since he was, I saw him in a visiting room maybe when he was 17. So, I started to really reflect when I had about 2 years left. And COVID lockdown, so we're locked down for COVID, and that was a brutal, you know. I remember we got locked down in March. You're not coming out of your cell but a couple times a week for a 10-minute shower. So you are, and during that time period, my father became extremely ill, and he had a stroke, he had meningitis, and he basically requires 24-hour care. I filed a compassionate release. You can see it online. I've seen it there before. And I got to give it to her. My sentencing judge, her name's actually Sylvia Rambo out of the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and she gave me the compassionate release. It was only about 7 months before I was supposed to be released, but she gave it to me. And, this was in December of 2020. I'm going to go home in July of 21. The prosecution did not even write a rebuttal to the motion. Like they did not even try to fight it. And the jail were the ones, the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons was the ones that were like, no, he's not, we don't think he should go home. Here's why. They found a calculation, like the 6 months that was added on to my sentence was never mentioned in my compassionate release. So when they took that in front of the judge, she really had no choice but to say, okay, that wasn't in there. You have to redo it. And so, I ended up getting out. But during the whole time of COVID, it got to the point where I was at in the whole bureau, I think, where there wasn't anything happening. So it was kind of a forced get clean, which,
Ask you this, Seth. I'm glad that that stuff happened in your life so that you could get clean. I know who
yeah,
you are, right? You might not remember me, but I remember you. Um, and you lived the prison life. You know, a lot of YouTubers tell prison stories and things like that. You actually lived that life. Um,
yeah,
I mean, you put in work. I mean, you've done so. I know who you are now that I about the tattoo on the back of the head. Um,
yeah,
and you live that life, and then eventually you come across my YouTube channel, and I think you
yes,
speak to it a little bit, and you reach out to me. Do you think the channel
yeah,
helped a little bit to remind you of?
absolutely. Listen, I've been out now for 2 years, and like I did not expect this when I came home, but the PTSD was real. It's real. I didn't really have problems. I had problems talking to people now, and the nightmares were intense. Like the girl, I'm lucky I have a wonderful girlfriend. She's got two kids. Her teenage son's starting to have some issues. That's why I hope that I got him your book. Hopefully he can not go down that path. And but you know, I started recently starting back with the stinking thinking where things aren't coming to me fast enough. I'm off probation or I'm off paper in 5 months. Maybe I can make this move. Maybe I can make that move. And one day I just happened to Google USP Pollock and your show came up. And so I watched it and I was like, wow, like I have a friend, a good friend that I did time with from Memphis, and I sent him one of your videos, the one where you're talking about the heroin brotherhood and everything. And he's like, wow, that took me back to a place I don't ever want to be. And that's how it was. When I watch your show, it takes me back, it puts me back in that place that I don't ever want to be again. That's not a life. You're not living, you're existing. That's it.
Sometimes we need that reminder. Sometimes therapeutic, you know. The mission was
Yeah.
to save kids from going through what we've gone through. Like you said, you got the book for your stepson. But you know what? I think the mission has become a group of us, guys that been through it, guys that
Yes.
have seen it. Sometimes a group of guys that, sometimes you had to fake it to make it, which means you had to
Yeah.
go through and demolish someone and act like, yeah, I did it. When really in your heart, man, you really didn't want to do that. Um,
No.
and
Yeah.
sometimes we need that. What are you doing now though? You working? What are you doing?
Yeah, I have a job, I have a job that I actually really like. I'm in the air conditioning. I'm around, what's great about it is I'm the only man that works there. I work with an all-female staff, so I love it. After being
Don't let your
hopefully
girl
this
hear that,
doesn't
bro. Don't let your girl hear that, but go ahead.
no, no, hopefully this doesn't affect that situation because I don't tell people my past. I don't, I feel like it is important for people to hear my story so that kids from a town like this can be like, hey, this can happen to me too. Just because you can go to college, you can do addiction attacks everyone. And if you think that you can do coke or do whatever and there's not going to be repercussions, you're crazy. If you think you can sell drugs and commit crimes and without repercussions, it's not happening. These people, look, they're going to get you. If they can get the president of the United States and get him under indictment, they can indict you. It can happen to anyone.
Anyone. So listen, man, I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences because they're real experiences, bro.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say before we get ready to go?
I want to say I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate this show. I feel like it's like almost like an Alcoholics Anonymous community. It's a little community, and when I watch it, it it takes me back to some place I don't want to be. People don't understand why I would want to put myself back there, but it's a reminder. You start to forget, and don't forget. Don't ever forget what it was like to get up and put on your boots and walk to the chow hall at 5:30 in the morning. I'll never forget it, and I don't ever want to do it again.
Pray to God, man, that I never forget it and I never take, my freedom for granted. And I pray that I stay on the right path. And every day's a struggle, man. It's not easy for me. It's not easy for you. It's not easy for the dudes that are watching this show, but it's real, man. And like you said, we don't want to forget. We're not just here telling stories, saying shit we're
Yeah.
making. This is the life that we live. And, hopefully hopefully it helps someone to stay out, or maybe it helps a young kid like your stepson to read the book or whatever it may be. But again, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to tell people if you like what we're doing, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. With respect, until tomorrow, Blood on the Razor Wire TV, we're out.